So just to let you know, those of you that aren't familiar with the, excuse me, the structure of the class, we just record this first 5 or 10 minutes where me or Mokshika, occasionally Vajrapriya, say something, our Dharma nuggets, and those get posted onto YouTube, my YouTube channel. So if you want to listen to the first bit again, you can do that, but we don't record the rest of the session, the meditation or the inquiry afterwards. Okay, so I thought I'd got my inspiration today from just a little quote from the Daily Tejaniya, which comes through my mailbox, probably comes through some of yours. Little quote of U Tejaniya's that comes from someone called Doug McGill. And the quote is, it's about what are called the 3 unwholesome roots. And he says, U Tejaniya says, just knowing the nature of the 3 unwholesome roots is really all you need in your ongoing pursuit of wisdom. And this struck me quite strongly. It's quite an early Buddhist approach. I think it's really just looking at the potential for recognizing what's really going on when there's something difficult or unpleasant going on in your experience, or something that's connected with craving, aversion, or ignorance, which I guess isn't necessarily unpleasant, because there's some fairly pleasant things that go along in relation to craving at times. So knowing the nature, the nature, so knowing how greed, hatred, and delusion, knowing them from a right point of view. So in its simplest thing, just recognizing craving as craving. So something happens, there's a response, there's a thought, ooh, the mind goes, ooh, and whatever happens, however it's that craving is manifesting, it is recognized as this is craving, this is wanting happening. And that's how simple right view can be, really. But what usually happens is that we don't know its nature. We don't know it. We get involved. We want. We get tempted, get seduced by, or we get repelled by, if it's something unpleasant, something difficult. So nature is when we're not personally involved with impersonal processes. We're able to recognize impersonal processes or conditioned processes arising through the senses. So seeing, hearing, touching, tasting, smelling, thinking, mind processes. They all have their own nature, not me, not mine. So we train through the language of objects, through recognizing that. But the 3 roots, of course, have their own nature, and that's what we look to tune into. What this feels like, this craving or aversion or delusion. Craving will often feel seductive or feel sort of sticky. You want to follow it. Aversion, destructive nature, the pushing away. And delusion, there's often this quality of not really seeing it, ignorance, ignoring, just not really clocking. I might have quoted U Tejaniya a few weeks ago, but I certainly did at Dharna Kosha, saying the delusion doesn't mistake the object necessarily. It recognizes what's there, but it mistakes the nature of the object. So it doesn't see the object for what it is, an impersonal, fleeting process, something that's changing, that's not fixed. And if it's not recognized, it is a source of dukkha. So I think just recognizing something, the nature of one of the three roots is or can be quite challenging. It's so easy to miss and get caught up in what's happening. We identify with something, and so I think it's a massive amount of the practice to recognize more and more any wanting or not wanting. We are so used to, for example, being disturbed by unpleasant feelings and their objects. So the wanting to avoid or change or seek something else. The idea is very ingrained in the mind that they're wrong. It must be wrong. If there's something unpleasant happening in my meditation, how do I get rid of it? And so a lot of the work of the practice is working with those conditioned views, recognizing the conditioned nature of certain ideas in the mind. And through that recognition, that knowing, in that moment, seeing through them. And of course, they come back again and again and again. But each time they come back and you're aware of it, you're strengthening that awareness muscle, and you're also weakening the unwholesome root, because each time it's being known more clearly. So we want to avoid unpleasant stuff, and the other side of the equation, we seek more pleasant feelings. This is what practice is really about. When there's a pleasant moment or two, so awareness doesn't reject experiences, and it doesn't want more of something. That's not part of its nature. The nature of awareness is simply to know, to recognize, to be aware of what's happening in a very benign way, open, spacious way. So the practice is training with all of our experience. And it's really interesting to notice what gets excluded. What are the situations, the moments in meditation, or the situations in your life where there's usually unconscious, I can't be aware of that. Sometimes it's, I don't want to be aware of that. But yeah, notice, because it can be with the very pleasant, but it can also more often be with the unpleasant. Just wipe it out. Yesterday I had a medical procedure. I had something called a gastroscopy, which I still can't say properly. I've had one before, and it was okay. It was a very interesting learning practice experience. But the one I had yesterday had very strong moments where my body rejected this tube that was coming into it. Very strong sort of retching, and I was reflecting on it afterwards, and it had the feeling, there was the feeling of life being threatened, my life. So there was clearly identification with my life being threatened, and it wasn't for very long. It was only a few moments before the nurse gave me some really, really helpful advice on using the breath to help the body's reaction calm down. And so initially I thought, oh, well, I wasn't able to be aware in that. But actually, I was more able to be aware than I recognized, because I listened. I didn't panic. I didn't try and pull the thing out, which apparently people do. And I was able to hear the instructions from this nurse very quickly and apply them. And I clearly knew this feeling that yeah, their nervous system on red alert. This is really bad news. You need to do something about this, and not follow that. Didn't follow that. So even though it was actually fairly traumatic, I came out shaking, and not able to speak, because they numb your throat. But I did feel I was able to stay with the experience. So awareness doesn't necessarily, I suppose what I'm making the point is, awareness doesn't necessarily, the objects were quite sort of unsettled, and felt very unpleasant. But there was just something that was able to take it in and able to act appropriately. Even though the feel of the whole experience didn't have that sort of calm feeling at all, but there was just a corner that was, as I say, was able to stay with certain things. Yeah, so yeah, I find it an interesting, where can we recognize more opportunities in a way to take awareness and not be too prescriptive about how it might look, how awareness might look in that situation, but looking back, you can see that something was still sort of working in the mind. Okay, so I'll leave it there, and you set yourselves up to sit.